The Describe Image question in the PTE exam requires you to think critically and speak quickly in a short amount of time. However, it offers a lot of points, so let's take a closer look at how you can earn all of them. Hi, I'm Sharon, and I'm a PTE trainer here at Benchmark Education Solutions. Thanks for joining me for this video today. We're going to talk about the basics of the Describe Image question type. We're going to tell you how it's scored, and then we'll look at an example. Then I'll give you some important tips for success. Before we go on though, you've probably already heard that this question type is known to be difficult, and you've heard correctly, it can be, but with practice and strategy, you don't have to worry. Let's talk more about that and get right into our overview. This is the third task in the speaking section, and you'll see either 6 or 7 of these questions on test day. You'll be asked to describe any of the following: a bar graph, a pie chart, a line graph, a table, a flowchart or diagram, a map, or a photo or image. Sometimes you may see 2 of these together in one question. Most of the time when this happens, it will be a bar graph and a line graph together in the same image. Part of the reason why this question type is so difficult is because you need to act quickly and think critically in a short period of time. The image you see will probably be academic in nature. You'll get 25 seconds to look at the image and prepare your answer, so use your time wisely. In our in-depth lesson, we go over the different formats you can use to help you prepare. Then you'll have 40 seconds to speak, but you should aim to speak in around 37 seconds. Why is that? This is important so that you don't get cut off when the timer ends, and so the examiner will be able to understand everything you say. Okay, now let's look at how this question is scored. This question tests your speaking skills, and the points you earn count toward your speaking score. It's scored using partial credit, which means you earn points based on your content, pronunciation, and oral fluency. For this question type, your content score can range from 0 to 5. This has to do with the content of what you say. Your pronunciation score is based on how you sound to a native speaker and can also range from 0 to 5. Your oral fluency score can also range from 0 to 5. Oral fluency has to do with how easily you produce speech. For example, hesitations and repetitions would harm your oral fluency score. We'll talk about all 3 of these more in just a minute. So now you can see that the maximum score you could receive per question is 15 points. With 6 or 7 questions on your exam, this is an important question to do well in. Here's a breakdown of how these categories are scored. Let's take a look, starting with content. The maximum score for content is 5, and to receive all 5 points, you have to describe all elements of the image and their relationships. It also means that you'll need to describe possible developments and make some conclusions or implications. This will show your ability to quickly think critically in English. The score of 4 is not all that different, but it leaves out the part about possible development. So with a score of 4, you're still describing all the key elements, but you're not going so far as to talk about possible developments or conclusions and implications the information might suggest. With a score of 3, you're dealing with most of the key elements of the image and referring to the implications. So notice that you're describing most of the key elements, but not all. If you have a score of 2, you've dealt with only one key element in the image and its implication, and you've also shown a basic understanding of several core elements. However, you probably haven't connected your thoughts or introduced critical thinking. A score of 1 means that you've described some basic elements of the image, but you haven't gone much beyond that. You've not described how the elements are connected. A score of 0, the lowest score, means that you've mentioned some very random parts of the image and nothing else. So as you can see, there are various levels to the content score. In our in-depth lesson, we talk more about how to find the key elements and expand on them. Next up is pronunciation. This involves the stress you place on words and how you pronounce your vowels, consonants, and double consonants. It's scored on a scale of 0 to 5. 0 being non-English and 5 being native-like. Let's look at this example. Spain has by far the lowest number of French speakers as displayed by the information in the table. Notice how I put appropriate stress on the words. If you were to pronounce displayed like displayed with a different stress, for example, this would negatively affect your pronunciation score. This scoring is similar to the scoring in other speaking questions. The last part of the scoring involves your oral fluency. This is the rhythm of your speech, the speed, and where you place pauses and emphasis. It also scores how well your sounds are connected, so they sound natural. You can earn from 0 to 5 points, 0 being disfluent and 5 being native-like. Listen to this example. This bar graph showcases the number of paint barrels manufactured each day in 1 month. If I were to stop and start or start over again after speaking half of the sentence, points would be deducted. This is why it's very important to just keep speaking once you start and don't pause for more than 3 seconds. If you do, it will hurt your fluency score, but more importantly, because the microphone will stop recording if you pause longer than 3 seconds. We'll talk more about that later on in this video. As I said earlier, your preparation time is very important. We'll look at some examples in just a bit. These examples will feature a clear path starting with an introductory sentence, then middle or body sentences, and ending with a concluding sentence. Even though this might seem obvious to you, it's very important to map this out in your preparation time so that you can plan how to say all this in 40 seconds. Then you'll need to use linking words to connect ideas so that you can flow from one idea to the next. Linking words can be temporal language like first or overall, or giving examples like for example, or comparing and contrasting information. Depending on the image you get in your question, there are specific things to keep in mind. We'll go over these in more detail in our in-depth lesson. But now let's look at our first example together. In this example, we've combined the bar graph and the line graph. It's very common to see these two types of graphs together in one image. This can make the question a little more difficult though, because you need to pull out the key elements from each graph and then figure out how they relate to one another. Take a few seconds and think about how you would describe this image. Pause the video if you'd like more time to think. Then we'll listen to a sample answer. What did you come up with? Let's listen to a sample answer.
This bar graph shows the average number of hours people in different professions work per week. Businessmen work the longest hours, 70 hours per week according to the graph. Movie producers work slightly less, 60 hours a week. Professions with the lightest workloads include chefs who apparently only work 30 hours a week and lecturers who do 25. The pie chart shows the occupations of people who suffer from a stress-related illness. Interestingly, 25% of people in this situation are lecturers and 10% are chefs, so working shorter hours does not necessarily help to reduce stress levels.
The speaker spoke for 39 seconds and she came up with the following points in her answer. This bar graph shows businessmen work the longest hours, professions with the lightest workloads. This pie chart shows working longer hours does not necessarily help to reduce stress levels. It's important to mention key elements that stand out. In this case, that included what the bar graph shows, those who worked the longest and had the lightest workloads, and then what the pie chart showed and how that relates to the bar graph. In this case, the speaker drew a conclusion and noted that working longer hours, as shown by the bar graph, does not necessarily help in reducing stress levels, as noted in the pie chart. Now let's take a look at another example, a map. Take a few seconds and think about how you would describe this image. What did you come up with? Here's a sample answer.
This map shows the global obesity problem. Although there are large parts of the world where no data is available, it's easy to see that this is a widespread problem. The problem is minimal in Asia, with less than 5% of the adult population classified as obese. In Europe, South America and Australia, approximately 10 to 20% of the population are obese. The problem is most serious in the US, with 30 to 40% of adults considered to be obese.
Here's how first the speaker makes note of what the map shows. This map shows, although it's easy to see that the problem is minimal in Asia. In Europe, South America, and Australia, the problem is most serious in. After she describes what the map shows, she connects ideas with the connective word although. Then she shows where the problem is minimal and where it is the most serious. Now let's take this one step further and look at a question with two maps. The idea is the same, but you need to take the key elements from both maps and connect them. Take a few seconds and think about how you would describe this image. What did you come up with? Now let's listen to a sample answer.
These two maps show the village of Stokeford in 1930 and 2010. In 1930, the village was very small, with just 10 houses and one larger house with a large area of gardens around it. There was a lot of farmland, a couple of shops, a post office and a primary school. By 2010, a lot of changes had taken place. There were a lot more roads, the village was much larger, and the larger house had been converted into a retirement home. The farmland had disappeared, as had the shops, although the post office was still there in 2010. The primary school had expanded considerably.
These two maps show in 1930 there was, by 2010 there were a lot more. The language she used is very important because it effectively shows that these things happened in the past and how changes were made. Now let's look at a pie chart, another very common image. How would you describe this? Are you ready? Let's take a look at a sample answer.
This pie chart shows the distribution of the world's population across the different continents. The vast majority of people live in Asia, with 60.4% of the total population located in this continent. The next most populated continent is Africa, with 15%, and this is closely followed by Europe, which is where 11% of the world's population lives. The Americas count for about 13%, with 7.3% living in North America and 6% in South America. Finally, Australia is the most sparsely populated continent, with just 0.3% of the world's population living there.
Notice how the speaker mentioned the following things. This pie chart shows the vast majority. The next most populated continent is. This is closely followed by. Finally, the speaker pulled the key elements from this pie chart, starting from what it represents, and then describing the vast majority of the population, the next most populated continent, and so on. She also concludes her description of the information with the temporal word finally. Now let's talk about flowcharts and diagrams, which could be two of the more difficult images to describe. Okay, let's hear a sample answer.
These diagrams show how humans and plants produce oxygen and carbon dioxide. Plants produce oxygen through a process called photosynthesis. They absorb sunlight and carbon dioxide from the air through their leaves and water through their roots and produce oxygen. The process operates in reverse for humans and animals. Humans and animals draw oxygen into their bodies when they breathe in, and when they breathe out, carbon dioxide is released.
Let's look at some notes. The speaker mentioned the following things. These diagrams show plants produce oxygen through, they absorb and produce. The process operates in reverse for humans. They draw, carbon dioxide is released. Notice how the speaker describes both diagrams and shows how they are different. She does this by pointing out that the process operates in reverse for humans. She also uses all of the parts of the diagram to her advantage, including the leaves and water in the images, as well as the chemical names listed on the diagram. Now let's look at our next example, a photograph. Think how you would describe this photo to someone who can't see it. And here's a sample answer.
This is a photo of a town or a city, possibly somewhere in Europe. In the foreground you can see market stalls. The ones nearest the front are selling produce. There are not many people around, so I think it might be quite early in the morning. The sky is blue and it looks like a clear day, although it also looks a bit cold. In the background there's a beautiful church or cathedral.
Let's talk about how the speaker mentions what she can see and then makes connections between the information. This is a photo of possibly somewhere in the foreground you can see there are not many. In the background, one connection she makes is that the sky is blue, but it seems like a cold day since the woman in the photo is wearing a coat. Now let's look at our last example for today, a table with data. Take a few moments and think about how you would describe this image. Can you see how each different image needs a different description? Let's listen to a sample answer.
This table shows the cause of land degradation by region. Europe has the highest percentage of total land degradation, 23%, in comparison with 13% in Oceania and 5% in North America. Europe has the highest percentage of deforestation, with 9.8%. Overcultivation is also a major problem in Europe, somewhat less of a problem in North America, and no problem at all in Oceania. Overgrazing has the least impact in North America, although 11.3% of land in Oceania has been degraded in this way.
Now let's look at some notes. The speaker described data from the table as well as making comparisons by using connective words. This table shows the cause of Europe has the highest percentage in comparison with, and Europe has the highest percentage of, a major problem, somewhat less of a problem, and not a problem. The speaker pulled out the key element of Europe having the highest percentage in two areas on the table. She also uses connectives such as in comparison with, and also shows the degree of the problems by using major, somewhat, and not a problem. Before we wrap up this video, I want to leave you with some important tips. Give yourself every possible chance to earn points with this question type. First, make sure the microphone is placed suitably in order to record your voice. This should be done before you start speaking so that you can be sure your answer is being recorded well. Start speaking immediately after the beep. You don't want to lose time, so make sure that you're ready. Use your preparation time wisely. As you've just seen, you need to examine your images before you speak, so use those 25 seconds wisely. The next tip is important. Keep calm and carry on. What does this mean? Basically, don't worry if you're nervous or make a mistake. If you do make a mistake, just keep going. If you say something incorrectly, just keep going. Why? If you say something incorrectly, your content score may be affected. So don't make it worse by lowering your fluency score. It's important to stay calm. Press the next button soon after finishing so that you can get started on your next question. Be sure to manage your time well during the test. Keep the timing of each question in mind too. You don't want to speak all the way until the 40-second mark, and you want to finish within the given time. Basically, you'll see the timer on your screen and you'll be able to understand when your time is coming to an end. Make sure to draw your conclusion just a few seconds before the 40-second mark. Shoot for 37 seconds so that your answer doesn't get cut off when the recorder shuts off. And last, keep in mind that the recorder stops if you pause for longer than 3 seconds, so speak fluently and smoothly with no long hesitations. Remember, keep calm and carry on. You can do this. Thanks for joining me today for this overview of the Describe Image question. We talked about how difficult this question can be, but if you practice and follow the format, it can be one of the easier questions in the speaking section. If you'd like to practice more PTE questions and learn more about the exam, check out our website here and watch our in-depth lesson with full examples and strategy. and the helpful do's and don'ts video for describe image. You should also take our PTE speaking mock test here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.